We're beginning the short story collection Anything is Possible this week by Elizabeth Strout. And I want to remind and encourage you to continue to be honest about your responses in this class. So it is not essential that you agree with everything that's being discussed, nor is it essential that you love everything we read in this class. In fact, sometimes negative or strong reactions against something can produce really important and interesting conversations. So we're going to begin just with some general discussion questions that will hopefully prompt ideas for your mini essays this week. And in future weeks online, I would recommend starting with the video because my goal is to encourage ideas and places to start for your writing assignment. One idea to talk about this week is a character from the stories that stood out to you. Obviously, Lucy Barton is going to be a character that connects the stories to one another. There are themes that also connect these stories to one another, so you can talk about a character or a theme as a way to narrow your focus. A review of this book describes it as unafraid to be gentle. This is not a fluffy, feel-good collection. It's been described as raw and quite authentic about what people and humans are like in and of themselves, but also to one another. So you could discuss the ways in which you agree with this description of the style of the voice of the book based on the 3 stories you've read so far. The 2 stories that follow Science are quite different from the opening story, but you could write about connections that you saw between any of the 3 stories and discussions we used to start this class. Discussions of the danger of the single story or empathy or human compassion, any of the things that have come up so far. Here is something we have not yet discussed, but is important to this class in thinking about human emotions that can limit our ability to connect with other humans and to express ourselves. And a dominant emotion in this novel that connects the stories is shame and guilt. Tommy, the main character, believes that he is the one to have caused the fire that's destroyed his home, his farm, and he believes his family in turn. One of the questions you could attempt to answer is how this fire has affected Tommy. What has it actually destroyed for him? Is it easier to blame ourselves when something tragic happens? And how do you understand the vision of God that Tommy explains on page 6 and 7 and then later tells Pete about as a kind of way to connect with him, but also as a potential gift? Pete is someone who expresses a great deal of rage. Some of this rage is private, but it comes out at various points in the story. He describes his father as someone who did things because he couldn't control himself and explains to Tommy that his father is the one who caused the fire. So the 2 characters are kind of bonding over their guilt and shame. Later in the story, Tommy sees Pete hitting the sign for his mother's sewing business with a kind of ferocity that astonishes him. And as a result, he attempts to give Pete something to kind of speak to this shame and this guilt. And he says to be able to be sorry about what we've done that's hurt other people, that keeps us human. You could, in your post, respond to this question of whether or not the ability to forgive and to say you're sorry, in many ways, is this something that keeps us human? How important is this ability to do that? And is it something that's common? Could be something you could discuss. The second story, Windmills, is about the main character, Patty, who is quite different than Tommy. They are also bonded over knowing Lucy Barton. Tommy befriended Lucy as the janitor at her school and saw her quite often. Patty has a different job as the school guidance counselor. You could write about the encounter that she has with another girl who's very different than Lucy Barton and the shame that this girl attempts to make her feel about herself. You could write about the reaction that Patty has to Lucy's book and reading it. She believes that the book had understood her. Have you had an experience with a book that is similar to Patty's experience reading Lucy Barton's book, that it understood you in a way that other people could not? In it, Patty discovers that Lucy had her own shame, but that she had risen straight out of it. And there's something about Lucy's ability to be honest about that shame that speaks to Patty as well. The exchange between Patty and Lila Lane is a pretty significant climactic moment in the story, and you could discuss Patty's reaction and her apology as well as speaking to Tommy's claim that what makes us human is our ability to apologize for behavior that, in retrospect, Lila does not remember, but it is stuck with Patty. The third story is potentially, I think, the most disturbing of the three stories because it contains some characters that are not very likable. In fact, are quite horrid, some of them. Before we know much about this strange couple, we actually learn they live in a glass house. So you could write about your reaction to the situation, how it's described to us. The outsider is us. We walk into the glass house and we are sharing Yvonne's lack of privacy. The proverb, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones, also applies in this story, and you could discuss the ways in which the ending brings this proverb back. And we have a character who prevents herself from judging in a situation where she might have otherwise judged Linda for staying silent. And finally, how much do you blame Linda, the wife, for what happens to Yvonne? And in her silence, is she actually an accomplice? Is she complicit? How complicit is she by remaining silent and turning the other cheek? These are some additional writing prompts that you can use. The first is talking about relationships between family, especially even marriages, but all of these stories are thinking about the ways that our family impacts us and helps us to survive. The second is this question of how much we are affected by our economic circumstances. There is a moment where Lucy's classmates are judging her for her lack of money, and the question of hunger, of how hungry we really are, and whether you can know hunger if you haven't felt it firsthand. And finally, in a review in the Washington Post, a reviewer compares this book to other of Strout's books and says that to render quiet portraits of the indignities and disappointments of normal life, the moments of grace and kindness we are gifted in response, is one of Strout's talents. You might want to write about moments where silence produces forgiveness, produces a way in which characters can grow, that words may not always be the best solution. Hopefully this gives you some ideas for a topic this week, and I look forward to talking with you online.